Right now I'm at the street and I want to cross, but I'm not near a crosswalk. But we're in California and it's 2023, so let's cross anyway. What I did wasn't a big deal, right? Well, it kind of is. Jaywalking is a term used in the USA and refers to an action of unlawfully crossing a street or without regard to approaching traffic. Up until now in California, it's been illegal to cross a street between two traffic signals outside of a crosswalk. Of the 50 states in the US, all but a select few currently have laws that prohibit jaywalking. California is currently one of those states that is trying to break down the barrier to those who want to walk freely. But not everyone agrees with this, and I'm here to shine some light on why crossing a street can be such a big deal. When most people think about crossing a street, they think about traffic safety. Look both ways before you cross a street, we're taught. And it's for a good reason. The early lesson of when and where to cross a street has our own safety in mind, to avoid tragedy. But for others, they may experience a very different tragedy. An unarmed Kurt Reinhold was walking near a street one day in San Clemente, California, while officers were watching him and waiting for him to jaywalk. Officers confronted him about it, and then he became angry and resisted attempts of arrest. It is then when he was pinned and struggling on the ground, when officers felt they were in danger, when his hand brushed against the holster of one of the officers' gun, and that's when this situation became fatal. In another city of California, an unarmed Chinedo Okobi was casually jaywalking in the city of Millbrae. An officer spotted him and told him to stop so he can have a word with him. Chinedo ignored the officer and continued to walk along his way. When backup arrived and officers surrounded him, he resisted all the directions from the officers and then got tasered multiple times. He died of heart failure. Now, whether these two people in these examples were wrong with how they interacted with the officers, in both cases, they died from what started as a seemingly trivial stop for jaywalking. These videos were hard for me to watch, and seeing that being stopped for jaywalking would be the last moments of someone's life. It's stories like these that add fuel to the nationwide debate that has been brewing for some time on whether there really should be laws restricting jaywalking. And these particular events was enough to spark political action in California. On March of 2021, Assemblymember Phil Tang of District 19 proposed Assembly Bill 2138, the Freedom to Walk Act, which would eliminate jaywalking citations in California. In his press release, he cited these two cases, and he also mentioned that data from 2018 to 2020 showed that Black Californians were severely overrepresented when it came to getting jaywalking tickets. That bill made it far, but not far enough. When it reached the governor's desk, Governor Gavin Newsome rejected it for reasons of traffic safety. In his veto, the governor cited statistics that in 63% of crashes that resulted in pedestrian fatality occurred when the pedestrian was taking action against traffic control or safety laws. So back to the drawing board they went. It wasn't long after that in 2022, Assemblymember Tang proposed Assembly Bill 2147, which was also named the Freedom to Walk Act. In this version, the bill was modified to not completely decriminalize jaywalking, but only define when an officer could stop a pedestrian for jaywalking. The main portion of the bill reads like this: a peace officer shall not stop a pedestrian for a violation unless a reasonably careful person would realize there is an immediate danger of a collision with a moving vehicle or other device moving exclusively by human power. This essentially means a pedestrian cannot be cited for jaywalking unless they were crossing a street at a time that would put themselves in immediate danger of a collision. And as you're probably thinking, reasonably careful person is a term that requires a bit of discretion by the officer. This bill was passed in November 2022, giving pedestrians the freedom to cross the street if it's safe to do so at the start of the calendar year 2023. Now, as the law stands, it really is an attempt to compromise and address the many sides of the jaywalking debate. And I do have mixed feelings about this, and that's where many of the arguments of this debate come in. For what it does help, for those who are concerned about jaywalking being used as a way to racially profile, this change of the law does make it harder for officers to stop someone for that reason, especially if they were crossing the street safely. It will also please those who think that jaywalking really shouldn't be a crime and that our peace officers should be focusing on more serious issues. And I can totally understand that, especially if there aren't many crosswalks around, it can be really tempting to jaywalk. Who wants to walk out of their way for extra 3 to 5 minutes just so they can cross the street if there's barely any traffic? But as a compromise, this bill technically did not make jaywalking legal because a pedestrian still can be cited for crossing a street at a location without a crosswalk if they cross at a time that could potentially put themselves in danger. At the start of the new year, I observed myself, curious to see that, knowing that the law has changed, if I would actually start jaywalking more often. What I found was that in some situations, I was willing to jaywalk more. I was actually looking for more opportunities to do so, especially if I was in a rush or I felt like I needed to save time in my day. Now, as a traffic engineer, this is a bit concerning to me, and I'll state some of the reasons why I think so. If this law results in people jaywalking more, it very well could lead to a rise in more pedestrian crashes and fatalities. But people also argue that the reason why people jaywalk so much is because the law isn't enforced most of the time. I think there's some truth behind that. And the more I think about this, the more I fixate on the language of the law itself. When I'm walking, I and other pedestrians are still responsible for our own safety and have to act as a reasonable person would. Reasonable person. How can you really define that? Can we always trust that pedestrians would act as a reasonable person would? Turns out, as human beings, we can only rely on our senses, and we are really not that good at estimating the speed of vehicles. One study published by the Australasian Rail Centre for Innovation found that drivers severely underestimated the speed of an approaching train. Other studies with pedestrians showed that they consistently underestimate the speed of approaching vehicles too. And we all know that distracted driving remains a problem, but it's also not limited to drivers. Studies show that around a third of pedestrians are also walking around in a distracted state, whether they are occupied with their phone or listening to music or other things. And you also have to take into account that drivers and pedestrians can also be intoxicated or not in a normal mental state. It is because these reasons that some are not in favor of jaywalking in general. David Schriebel, a professor of psychology who studies pedestrian behavior at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, just says that the time that you may save while jaywalking is not worth the risk. So overall, I don't think that this change in law here in California will settle the debate or solve the problem with jaywalking. It does make California one of the few states here in the United States that is starting to break away from criminalizing jaywalking. And as a traffic engineer, I often wonder how we as a profession can lessen and prevent the occurrence of vehicle and pedestrian crashes while also lessening the temptation to jaywalk. One way is to appropriately place more crosswalks so people aren't faced with the choice of going way out of their way to access a crosswalk in a distance versus having to jaywalk. By making designated crossings more appealing and safe to cross, it will hopefully discourage people to cross at more riskier locations. As for me, I'm going to continue to watch my own jaywalking habits knowing that this law has changed, and try to remind myself that just like driving, trying to save a couple minutes is often not worth it if you're potentially putting your life in danger. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this in the future. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.